Number one, it's very obvious, but it has to be said. It could be the theme of our whole podcast and our whole show and your whole coaching philosophy, and that's don't go out too hard.
Yeah, and people are probably sick of me hearing it, and it's very boring coaching advice, but it is the most critical piece of information out of anything that I could tell anybody on race day is, disregard your pace in the water, your power on the bike, and your pace as a runner. Disregard that at your peril, and you must totally be up to date with what you're doing at all stages of the race. So going out too hard might feel good, but you're going to pay for it at some point in the race. Whether it's, I can use myself as an example in Hawaii back in 1988, in the dinosaur years, and feeling good with 3K to go on the run, and then it all fall apart with literally 2K to go, where you've got full body cramp and so obviously I didn't measure my effort well. It's an 8 and a bit hour day, and here I fell short by 8 minutes. It's like we talked about with Bernal. It's a 3-week race. An Ironman's a 8, 9, 10, 11, 14-hour day, and you just cannot go too hard at any point in that whole day. And you do that at your peril.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone that's ever had full body cramps, I've had them once, and it is not enjoyable, to say the least. I mean, think of just a hamstring cramp or a quad cramp and then multiply it by your whole body. Point number 2, respect the event. Similar to our theme of what we just said.
It is. And there's so much in endurance that you need to respect. And that's why I love the sport, because, you still have to respect a 100-meter runner. You still have to respect a 50-meter swimmer, because they have to train for that, for that one event. And if they make the slightest mistake, they're going to pay for it. Then, as a 100-meter runner, you get the start wrong, your race is over. You can't, but as an endurance event, you've got time to cover your mistakes to a degree. And if you go too hard, you're pretty much doomed. So that's sort of the first thing we talked about. But the second one we're on now is definitely respecting the nature of the event. I suppose that the distance is the main thing that I always say. If you don't understand what time you're going to be out there for, and you don't measure your effort against that time, and that's what respecting the event is. The temperature of the day, the difficulty of the terrain. Obviously most people are competing against themselves, and they want to improve against themselves. But we do have a small section of our group that are trying to podium in an age group, or pros who are trying to win. And we have a cross section of 3 types of people, and you've got people who are new and just want to complete. So, you've got to respect the event. And I have done the same thing. I have done, I can't even remember how many triathlons. It's over 250 triathlons of, that many Ironmans and half Ironmans and long course events and Olympics that, and there gets a point where you think, oh, I've got this. And the longer I'm in my career, the more I didn't respect the event until it bit me so badly that I just went, oh, what just happened to me? I had a huge failure in one of my races, and it was such a shock to me because I'd forgotten about respecting everything about the requirements of the day. I've done this before, and you often hear in work and life where I use the example of guys falling off ladders who've been working off ladders for 40 years or been working off scaffold, and they have an accident because they've not respected it. It's like driving a car. The minute you take your eyes off the road, you could possibly have a crash. So you have to concentrate every second of every minute of the time you're driving. And when you're on a ladder, you have to be the same. Just because you've been up a ladder for 50 years doing the same thing doesn't mean you're not going to have an accident. It's the same with your event. You've got to understand that just because you've done it before over and over, that you should be able to just go through everything that you've done before and tick it off. But if you don't think about it and consciously live the moment, of the event, that you are going to pay big time.
It's advice for not only the beginner who's doing the event for the first time and, making sure they respect the event that they're about to do, but it's also advice, like you're saying, to the veteran who might have done it so many times that they risk being complacent, and complacency is the enemy of success. And yeah, you see that play out all the time. It happens in sports teams when they have a good run and they're a little bit confident and then they get a little bit of a shock. It might have happened to Melbourne last weekend in the AFL, where they've gone on a run of 11-0 and then they come up against the bottom team in Adelaide and they're a little bit complacent, and then bam, one of the bottom teams shocks them and gets an upset win. So.
You see it happen all the time. And that's why we've often laughed amongst our group to bet on the team that's least likely to win, because the team that's unbeatable will lose to that team, which doesn't make any sense.
It's funny how it always happens, but yeah.
Yeah. So look, there's so much involved in that, and look, the people who are more experienced, they're the ones I'm really talking about. The beginners, the first timers, they've got such fear that they respect the event. And that's the thing. The person who's done it for a long time has lost the fear factor because their confidence is skyrocketing, because they know that that's not going to be the thing that's going to cause them to falter. The event. So, and that's the thing I'm telling you, is if you don't respect it, and if you're underprepared as a newbie, well, that's a classic mistake. But normally that doesn't happen. It's more normally the person who's done a lot of it that just gets too complacent, as you said.
Yeah, and my last point on this is that you don't just talk about this when you thinking about an Ironman or a ultra endurance event. You are talking about respecting any event you're doing, whether that's 100-meter sprint or a sprint distance triathlon or Olympic distance triathlon. Just because they're not as long as a half Ironman or Ironman, you still have to respect them. And you would say for a sprint, for example, respecting the event comes into play where you actually have to do a more proper warm up and get your body fully ready to go at an intense pace. Whereas you don't have to do that for an Ironman. But that's just an example of where respecting the event means different things for different distances.
Yeah, there's a bit of a flow on from that as well, George. Respecting the event as a 100-meter sprinter, the event is just not the 100 meters. It's that 45 minutes prior, so that you don't end up halfway down the track with a torn hamstring. So that you are actually prepared physically for, it's a 100-meter all-out burst. So that's part of respecting the event. And of course, the endurance stuff, because it's done at such low intensity, the injury risk is less. But there's so many other things that can, you can have a horrible day if you haven't respected the swim or the bike, and then you get to the run and you end up having to walk. It is not enjoyable. It is such a disappointment to actually know that you've blown it, not because of anything but stupidity on your behalf of not respecting what was ahead of you and not focusing on things that were important.